What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just please make sure you keep those comments respectful. And if you're interested in supporting your favorite podcaster, yours truly, my Cash App will be in the bio, or episode description. So appreciate that, guys. As I was thinking about what I wanted to do leading up to tonight's episode. I think there have been a lot of discussions about what's going on with the New Orleans Saints right now, with certain hires. Obviously got our offensive coordinator, our defensive coordinator, been filling out some position coach positions on the staff. And at least from my perspective as a fan, I think things are looking up in terms of the guys that are being brought in to help develop, guys that are currently on the roster, guys that we are going to add in free agency, and guys that we hopefully going to add in the draft that become staples of the Kellen Moore regime. As we know, you know, um, the draft is everything for a new coach. I think when you look at the past two coaches we had, Sean Payton's first draft was a home run. Obviously, you get Reggie Bush, who was at that time the most prolific athlete in college football, maybe in college football history at that point in time. A guy that brings excitement to your fan base, a guy that's going to put butts in seats. And knowing what we were coming out, with that hurricane, with Hurricane Katrina and everything, you needed somebody that people were familiar with that could get hope, right? Then you get a guy like Roman Harper in that draft. You get a guy like Marcus Colston in that draft. Um, and that helps spark an incredible run. So, and that was just a few pieces that I named that went into establishing that team that will win a Super Bowl, I guess 3 or 4 years later. I don't know how. I mean, I always get confused with how to conduct the years, whether it's 3 or 4. But either way, those players were large component to creating that success and getting the Super Bowl, right? And then you go through some time and you get to hit the 2017 draft, and that is the draft that propels you to being back in the title picture again. So we saw two really home run drafts in the Sean Payton era that really benefited the team and kept them in an area or an era of contention. Then you see the Dennis Allen years, and we have a couple good picks. I think Olave was a good pick. I think Brian Brzee was a good pick. I think Trevor Penning is growing, but I wouldn't call him a good pick at this point in time in his career and what his production has been, right? So, excuse me. They kind of missed on some draft picks in some recent drafts, and you kind of bottom out last year because your veterans got older and themselves. And then the young guys that you banked on coming in and really bringing some structure and kind of taking the reins by this point, they just didn't really do it. I mean, Isaiah Foskey can't get on the field. Um, our wide receivers we drafted last year just didn't cut it. A.T. Perry, who was a draft pick the year prior, didn't even make the cut this year, and ended up getting cut from the team and signing on to Denver's practice squad and didn't really get any run there. Um, Kendra Miller, I mean, he'll give you 3 plays and then he's in the injury tent. So we didn't really get the production from the draft class that we wanted. And that's not a surprise that Dennis Allen didn't last as long as maybe he had hoped, maybe the organization had hoped, and we had to fire him. So in comes Kellen Moore with probably the most, I would say, probably the largest or biggest offseason in the team's history. Ideally, you would say, oh, the biggest offseason was the offseason, first offseason when I was Sean. But I think you hired a guy with continuity in Dennis Allen, that you kept most of your roster intact, right? You knew you weren't going to be going crazy in the free agency given the cap situation, even though like you did make a run for Deshaun Watson, you did make a run for Justin Simmons, you did make a run and did succeed in getting Derek Carr, who was one of the top quarterback free agents on the market at that point in time. So you saw that there was a willingness to pay when they needed to, right? But from an offseason standpoint and with the excitement around it, I think there was probably more nervousness because we were without Sean Payton, because we were going on year two without Drew Brees. And so there was a little uncertainty. But um, I don't think our expectations of really evaluating every single move was what it is now with Kellen Moore's era, because he not only represents just a new coach in tow, but he represents a new era. No Sean Payton remnants really on this staff. I mean, yeah, there's some guys that had some experiences here in New Orleans, had some guys that worked. Obviously, we kept Keith Williams, the wide receiver coach. We brought back our running backs coach, who kind of took a year to coach with New York last year. Um, but for the most part, Kellen's bringing in his guys, has his vision, um, and that's exciting, right? I don't think there's as much nervousness because there's more of a breath of fresh air. But with that being said, there is going to be an expectation that we get these things right. Not that the Saints are going to be expected to compete next year or the year after, but I think we all can agree that the the hit rate and success rate of these prospects that we pick in this year's draft is going to determine, how soon we are back to winning. First, I just kind of want to start competing for the division. I think you got to start from square one at this point in time, and then where are you competing for championships? So this draft and arguably next draft are going to be maybe two of the biggest in the past 20 years or so. So gotta get excited about that. Now, um, with all those things in perspective and seeing how, some of the hires from the coaching staff standpoint has they've already kind of transpired, and we kind of have an idea of what we're going to be doing. Or at least, yeah, we have an idea, or it's looking like we have a vision of what Kelly might want to bring, especially on the defensive end, getting a veteran guy. Um, like Coach Staley to take over, who can kind of work with what we have while also slowly phasing in what he wants to do from a personnel and schematic standpoint. And then I think that allows Kellen to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of collecting talent maybe the next year or two on the offensive side of the ball and being able to focus on that because you have a guy, a veteran coach and Coach Staley, who can maybe handle some things. He's also been a head coach before, so he brings a level of expertise in terms of management and being able to alleviate some of the things that a first-year head coach in Kellen Moore might not want to have to experience right away. Um, and so I just kind of been thinking about, okay, if I'm Kellen Moore and not so much the Saints organization, but what I'm saying to the Saints organization, what are some of the things that um, I'm looking at over the next month and a half? I know a lot of talk right now because it's the combine has been on the draft. But there's a long time, right, between now and the draft, and that includes cuts having to be made. That includes a new league year. That includes possible trades that have to happen to be cap compliant. That includes free agency, right? And that's where my interest level is right now. I'm really interested to see where we go. I've been given um, some ideas of where we're going to go as an organization, but I don't quite know. And so I want to use some of the information I have and also just kind of thinking about where Kellen Moore might be and just say, hey, if I was in his shoes, this is what I would do. So we'll start there, right? We've already gotten our hires. We've already gotten our coaches in tow. Now it's time to assess our roster. You have an aging roster. You have some young pieces, right? But um, most of the folks that are taking up the bank right now from a financial standpoint, some of your veteran guys, when you think of Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis, Alvin Kamara, or Kamara, sorry, AK Derek Carr as your quarterback, currently on the roster, and um, is going to get a $10 million bonus pretty much if he's still on the roster by the beginning of the new league year. And that's pretty much it because he could be a cut candidate post June 1st, um, and that could save the organization 30 million. Now they won't get that 30 million until June 2nd. Excuse me. So then you got to think about what you want to do with your older guys. And so when I think of that scenario, right, and there's been some scenarios, it's kind of like we can't win. It's a double-edged sword. It's if you restructure Derek and try to have him play for another year or two, well, you lose some of the old guys. With that, some in the fan base, they're ready to move off of DeMario. They're ready to move off of Cameron Jordan. And so instead of having to restructure those guys, you can move on. They can retire, whatever it may be. And because you restructured Derek Carr, that creates a ton of cap space and getting you to be cap compliant, which of course you kind of want. You don't want to be teetering on the edge. But and then the other side of that, right, is if you decide to cut or trade Derek Carr, currently he has the fourth highest cap hit in the NFL, and so you got to eat that cost somehow. Now maybe with the trade partner, you throw in a pick. I mean, I think we have 2/3 and maybe 2/4 or something like that. Maybe you throw in a pick so that a team can eat that cap, and so that helps you a little bit, gives you some wiggle room. But even still, at that point in time, with the dismissal, so to speak, of Derek Carr, you have to then maybe restructure your older guys, your Cam Jordans, your DeMario Davises, your Tyrann Matthews, your Alvin Kamaras, and even some of your young guys like Ruiz, McCoy, Pete Warner, um, who those last three have been dealing with some injuries the past couple of years. So you get a little hesitant about, you know, throwing some money to the back end for guys like that who maybe if um, their bodies don't hold up and cooperate with what they're trying to do on the field, they it may have 2 to 3 years left for you. But that's also another side of, hey, we got rid of Derek Carr, but we still need to start making things work, try to get cap compliant. So I feel like both sides of the camp that just want us to move off of people, it's going to be hard. You can't move off of Derek Carr and your veteran guys all in one offseason. That's going to take time. And so if I'm Derek Carr, what I'm pushing for, what I've been led to believe is being pushed, is that, you know, Derek Carr looks for a new home. Whether that's a trade candidate or you designate him as a post-June cut, so that allows him to be able to become a free agent, decide where he wants to sign, and there are going to be some suitors there. I'll mention a couple in just a second, but I think you need to start to evaluate that. He's 34, 35 years old. Derek Carr is not the future. And for a first-time head coach, they're going to be thinking about that. How can I build my foundation? That's not saying that they're going to draft quarterback first round, even though that's in the thought process. That's not saying that they're giving up on Spencer Rattler, because I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the org really loves him. Um, I think that Kellen could be, once he meets Spencer and talks about some philosophy. And here's my thing: I don't know if they've met yet, right? But let's say they have met, and Spencer just wows Kellen Moore, and he believes, hey, you know what? I can really build around this young guy. That could be something that happens. So let's not just totally dismiss that possibility either. But either way, Derek Carr is not in the future of this team. And some say, well, yeah, man, you keep Carr, you still trying to win and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, we're 14-13 in his 27 starts. I don't think we're necessarily winning anything. And if you're going to be in the middle of the pack, try to be middle of the pack with a young quarterback that's going to have some growing pains, and you're trying to build up your roster, have a little bit of a youth movement, and assess where you can really make the impact, where you can really grow, where you can really plug in these holes to a degree. And so if I'm Kellen Moore, let's have that discussion, especially because the discussions have already been happening. I'm not coming in Even though from the outside world it's going to look like I'm coming in and I just hate the guy and I just want him out of the building. That's not really the case. These are conversations that Derek Carr and the organization have already been having since November. And not so much that Derek Carr already be gone, but that, hey, came here for Dennis Allen. He's no longer here. I understand. Like, I do want to win, and I do think Derek Carr wants to win. And I truly believe he wanted to win here as a New Orleans Saint. But the writing's on the wall. I think everybody knows where we are, and that includes Derek Carr. And while he's in the twilight of his career and doesn't have many years left, especially as a starting quarterback, you want to be able to maximize that, right? And so of course, he comes and says, "Hey, let's just start to think about some things. Like, let's be cooperative. I want to work with you guys because, again, he has a no trade clause. Um, even the whole restructure thing. Like, while technically they could just go and do whatever they want with that, would that be the best thing to do when it comes to player relationships, and not just with Derek, but with players around the league, and if they want to play with you? Because you can't to me, you can't penalize Derek Carr as a Saints organization for the contract that you gave him because you misevaluated what he could bring. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't get his money because he earned it. Like you paid him for what he is or what he was and what he might be. But just because he didn't get to where he might be doesn't mean he didn't do what he needed to do within his skill set. Within his skill set, and he deserves his money. Like, it's not his fault. I'm not going to penalize the player for signing a really good contract for them, kind of a because the organization was that desperate. So, um, uh, to my knowledge, there's been good conversations. We have been trying to make this um, as amicable of a process as possible. I think on the Saints side, they value the relationships they have with players. They don't like ugly divorces. They want to do right by the player. And I think at this point in Derek Carr's career, um, I can say that the Saints haven't necessarily done him the way the Raiders did in his last year, and so I think there is a level of respect from the organization for the organization coming from Derek Carr's camp of just how we've handled the situation. I think we've tried to be first class with one another and go through this process. So, and that's not to say that there hasn't been discussions of him coming back, but for the most part, Four wants a change of scenery and he's willing to work, but he does have some places that he wants, and there are some places that want him, which would be great from a trade standpoint. And I mentioned trade because he does have that no trade clause. And let's say we were kind of being a-holes to him throughout the whole process. He could very well say, you know what? I'm not waiving my no trade clause, but I don't want to play for you anymore. So if you don't want me here, you're going to have to cut me. And if he's smart, he's not giving that ultimatum until his $30 million cashes in. And so I think that's a little bit of the game that he's going to be playing. But at the same time, I think the Saints are willing to give, a good bonus and good severance package, so to speak, if they can get something. And so, hey, if I can get a 6th round pick and a Treylon Burks, and we give you Derek Carr, and if you won't take the money, we'll give you Derek Carr and nothing, or maybe a pick swap in the 6th. If um you take Derek Carr, we might give you like a 5th rounder or something like that, just to say, hey, like we appreciate you taking on this money type of deal. So I can see a team like Tennessee, which um, Carr has history with their coach. He was there. He was one of Carr's coaches in Vegas with the Raiders, Oakland and Vegas, and one of Carr's best years was under Brian Callahan. Um, all signs are pointing with Tennessee Titans that they don't really want to draft a quarterback, but they will if they have to. They want to get the best player available. So your Abdul Carters, your Travis Hunters. I think there's still a level of belief in Will Levis, but just that he isn't ready right now. So to bring in a veteran like Derek Carr, who knows he has maybe a year or two left doing this thing really at whatever level he can do it at. Say, hey, man, you come in, you let Will really soak and learn under you. Because to play devil's advocate with Will Levis, he hasn't really had that, right? He comes in, Ryan Tannehill knows he's a lame duck. So what level of input and development is he helping along with the coaching staff with? Um, Ryan gets hurt, Will comes in, so has to play pretty much early as a rookie, and then comes in his next year, new coaching staff, new offense. And I think he had 14 touchdowns, 13 picks or something like that in his second year, still learning, playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in football, no Derrick Henry. So the team really doesn't have that great of talent, but still had some good pieces in Tony Pollard over at the running back position. You get Calvin really at the wide receiver position. Um, and so okay for a second year guy, but then you learn, okay, maybe he does need to chill a little bit. And so bringing a guy like Derek Carr to where you can help, give Will Levis some time to truly develop might be a good opportunity for Tennessee, who I think would rather go that route and see what they have as opposed to trying to draft a Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders #1 overall. And then you pretty much have to thrust that guy into a poor, poor personnel group right now, all around. So um, that's a team I'd look at. Obviously, the Jets, but although I think the Jets would much rather get him on the open market as opposed to having to part with a pick. That was kind of what was going on with the whole trade situation with the Raiders when the Saints and the Jets were kind of looking at it. And we knew the Jets really wanted Aaron Rodgers anyway, so they weren't really trying to part with things. They were like, if we're going to trade for a quarterback, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. Um, and so ended up Carr being on a free market. Saints ended up getting them. Jets ended up trading for Aaron Rodgers, and we know how that went. So it'll be interesting. But for me, if I'm Kellen Moore, hey, we're really kind of hammering down on this because one, I know the conversation's already been starting, um, and I just want to start on a good foot. So tell me what I need to do to keep the relationship with Derek Carr strong, to where I don't come in and mess up the work that's already been happening. We find a good home for him, hopefully in the trade, so we can get some draft compensation and be able to build more on the squad. So if I'm Kellen Moore, that's one of the first things that I'm doing, and I know that's what's kind of going on, is as he's meeting with personnel and everything, trying to figure out what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Then I would do this. Uh, Now let me put on my free agency hat, and just as a caveat, next week I am actually going to do a breakdown of like my top 5 free agents per position, and then kind of highlight some guys that I would love the Saints to select. Actually, I might just keep it to that. Who are the top 5 free agent prospects that I would want the Saints to sign? Excuse me, at each position. But for today, I will just let you know the areas that I would want to address in free agency. You probably heard me say it on the show. If you follow me at Future NBA Gov on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, I've been adamant that I want a veteran next to um, Talisa Fuaga. And that's he's going into year 2, but he was our rookie left tackle, our first round pick. Actually graded out as one of the best left tackles in the league. Didn't give up too many pressures, didn't give up too many sacks. So, and keep in mind, this guy moved from right tackle to left tackle. So, he definitely transitioned well. Um, Most offensive linemen will tell you how ridiculously hard that is to go from right tackle to left tackle and vice versa, because the footwork and all that type of stuff just changes drastically. But he did a really good job. And so the sky's the limit. You hope he continues to improve going into year 2. And I know there's been some talks about, hey, draft the offensive lineman, draft the guard, or draft one of those tackle guard hybrids and put them next to Fuaga. And what I will say is he had his struggles when we were kind of makeshift at left guard and having guys making their first starts, and then obviously out Eric McCoy is not in the lineups, which made a lot of things tougher on the communication on the offensive line, and you saw some struggles. And so that's where I want a guy that can come in that's a veteran. Doesn't have to be an expensive one, even though if you're going to spend some money on, let's say, a Trey Smith, like I'm all for that. But I think you can get a guy left guard that is a veteran that has produced well in this league, so not a journeyman by any stretch, or a guy that's been maybe a third or fourth swing offensive lineman, and you give him a chance. But nah, a guy with some pedigree that has some starts under his belt that has showed promise, and not only will that help Big 75, that's going to help Eric McCoy, especially should he stay healthy with terms of communication, and him being able to kind of control that right side. Because that right side still maybe the iffy part of our offensive line. You got Trevor Penning. Hopefully he takes another leap. You got Cesar Ruiz. Hopefully he, I don't know, continues to play better or plays better. I don't know how to say it, but um, I want a veteran. A guard in the draft would be good. I'm not even saying not to draft a guard, but I would say draft a guard that you're probably high on to maybe sit behind your starting left guard for a little bit and learn. Because by the time of that draft pick comes in, like I want them to be a little bit seasoned in terms of mental preparation and things like that, and can truly be able to step next to whether it be a year 3 or year 4, Talicia Fuaga. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I want a veteran there, somebody we can trust, somebody that's going to be serviceable, somebody that has a history of good health because we're going to need it. And then that helps from a depth perspective because now you have guys that probably haven't had to be your starters. Now they're your second and third strings. They can continue to be developed. And we know how Kellen Moore feels about development. So for me, offensive lineman, left guard is kind of a big thing, and then I would say maybe getting a few kind of journey people, swing tackles to round out your depth overall. Get a backup center, whether that's in the draft or in free agency. We need a true center. We can't keep taking guys that play guard and put them at center and things like that because that just messes up the continuity, I think, and the consistency. And we just need some consistency up front, both to help with the run game and the pass game. Um, Another position that I would happen to look at in free agency is interior defensive line. Yes, I'm a big component of drafting that position because I think there's a lot of young pieces there, but there's some veterans there, especially those that may have some familiarity with Coach Staley's defense, and we'll touch more about those specifics next week. But I don't think you have to spend big money in the interior defensive line, but I think you need some rotational guys, some guys with some experience maybe in this type of defense and what you're going to be asking for, and that can help unleash Brazil a little bit, especially if you do plan on drafting a defensive tackle as well, and letting that young man grow a little bit instead of having to be thrust into it. I think the Saints did a really good job of letting Brzee grow his first year. Colin Sanders and Nathan Shepard kind of were your starters, so to speak, and you would see Brzee sprinkled in. And I think towards the end of the year and going into year two, he definitely grew a lot from that. And so I would want to do the same thing with the next defensive tackle that I draft, if we even do that, right? Um, I would say wide receiver. I think you need a veteran in the room. I think Cedric Wilson is probably going to be a cut. And so if you can find a veteran wide receiver, let's say an Amari Cooper maybe, um, that can come in, help lead that wide receiver room as Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, maybe a potential draft pick or two. They're starting to grow their games, have a veteran in the room. That would be beneficial in my opinion. And here's another thing that I'm doing. So let's say I get rid of Derek Carr, right? I get rid of Derek Carr. I'm gonna talk to Mickey Loomis. I'm gonna talk to Jeff Ireland, and I'm gonna talk to Miss Gale, and I'm gonna say, hey, um, as I'm evaluating this quarterback position, and look, this is whether I want to grow with Spencer or I want to go draft my guy. Um, I want to have a veteran presence here. I want to have somebody that knows what I like to do. And there's this guy that's played for Dallas. He's a free agent. Yeah, he's about 32, but he has a ton of experience. He's a guy that prepares well. You see that on his resume, the way he's come in for Dak Prescott in relief when Dak's been injured in 2 years or two separate years, and he's come in, he's done well. He's kind of led the ship, and even did well last year when the Dallas Cowboys weren't as talented offensively as they were that first time around. That's a guy I want to bring in, right? I want him to have an opportunity to compete for the starting job, No, I don't believe he's the future. And yes, we can talk about a reasonable contract. But that's a guy I want. You guys said that what I want and within reason, right? We can talk about these things. And I've seen you guys go after the Deshaun Watsons. I've seen you guys go after the Matthew Staffords. I've seen you guys go after the Derek Carrs. I'm not even asking for that type of price tag for this type of thing. Hey, give this guy 2 year, 20 million, 15 guaranteed, something like that. Hey, I think we can get him. And we're giving him an opportunity to start compete for the quarterback one job. Again, do I think he's a long-term guy? No, but he's a guy that's stable. And what our organization needs is stability, and we need stability at the quarterback position. And whether that's him pushing Spencer to be better, his best self, and maybe Spencer wins that competition, that'd be great. I'd love that. You'd love that. I think we all would love that. But then we have one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league in case some things happen. What if Spencer gets nicked up or we need to make a change mid-season? Is looking like we're not going anywhere. I want a guy that I can trust in there. Or we've talked a little bit about some of these quarterback prospects that we may want to bring in, and we also talked about what does that development look like. And I don't believe in just throwing a guy out to the fire. And I want to have a safety blanket for them, and a guy like Cooper who prepares well, busts his behind every day in practice, every day in the film room. He's going to teach them how to be an NFL quarterback and how to prepare like one. And that's the guy you got to have in your locker room. And so, hey, go out if we can. Let's talk to his people. Let's see where his head at. But I really want you to bring Cooper Rush in. Um, I think that's a good opportunity, right? I mean, who else is going to give Cooper Rush? Think about the openings right along the landscape. Who's going to give Cooper Rush an opportunity to compete for a quarterback one job? Not handing him a job or anything like that, but giving him an opportunity to compete. I don't think too many teams are going to do that. We know how Dallas kind of played with his money a little bit. And this is probably the only opportunity he will ever get at this point in his career to at least have the possibility of competing and earning a quarterback one job. And again, it's a guy he's had his most success with in Kellen Moore, who I'm playing as, I guess. It could be a really good marriage. I know fans are probably hearing me saying, "God, Trey, why would you want to bring a freaking middle of the pack or worse quarterback to New Orleans?" And it's because we're growing. We're not the team right now that is going to win 13 games. Not right now, from what we can see on paper. And so we need. I think we need better people in the locker room too. And bringing a guy like in who, at least from afar, I've watched buses behind, come in when his number's called and do well and produce. You kind of want that in your room, don't you? Guys that have that level of attention to detail, and want to work, and they're one of your best workers, and they know how to support a quarterback room and support a room in the locker room. Might be a good guy to bring in, especially for your first year head coach who's wanting to set his culture. I'm gonna get help in the myriad of things. Like I said, he either competes and beats out Spencer Rattler, and he's our guy that's steering whatever this year is supposed to be, and possibly making a way for quarterback in 2026. He could be the guy that pushes Spencer to where Spencer takes his game up another notch because, in my opinion, being pushed by Cooper Rush is a lot different than being pushed by Jake Hayner. And I even think last year that was a healthy competition. So even bringing a guy that's not just a backup quarterback in the league, but is seasoned and has produced, that could take Spencer Rattler to another level, right? And that could end up being your franchise quarterback for the next 10, 15 years. And again, if you draft a guy, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milrow, if you get lucky and you get a Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, you probably don't have to worry about Cooper Rush. But at this point, he'd be on the roster. But at the very least, if you don't want to play them right away and throw them to the wolves, you can have Cooper come in, take the lumps. Also, maybe show he's getting a good payday, and maybe show that, hey, it might not work here because I'm not the long term option, but I at least showed that I could do it. And maybe another team kind of gives them an opportunity to be a starting quarterback again too. So a lot of things on that front. So that would be kind of my big signings, I guess. Offensive line, especially at left guard, then getting some offensive line depth. Maybe getting a veteran wide receiver in the building. Maybe getting an interior defensive lineman, maybe even some of these outside backers as we transition to maybe this 3-4 style. So again, getting some guys in that may know the system a little better. And I think getting a guy at the quarterback position like Cooper Rush that can provide stability for a number of things, whether that's competing with a Spencer Rattler or competing or being that safety blanket for another young draft pick at the quarterback position. Um, and then I don't want to go too much into the draft because I think there are a number of things that the Saints are looking at, and I think that Kellen Moore is looking at. So we won't touch on that yet, but I think that's kind of where I'd end. Where, hey, if I'm Kellen Moore right now, we're in Indianapolis, we're at the combine, we're talking. Hey, we need a handle on this quarterback position. We need to get that handled. League year is coming up really, really soon. We need to get a head start on that. It's fair to Derek to get a head start on that, whether that be via trade or that be via cut, and he can find a new home. And then we really need to hammer down what our organization is going to be for the draft. But in between the draft is free agency, and so there might be some stop gaps, right, that we can fill and have an idea of okay, we got a really talented player, maybe on a cheaper contract at these positions, so that reduces I guess the high risk, high reward mentality that you might have to go into the draft if you just have a bunch of needs and you have no buffer, um, no space or no wiggle room. It's going to be hard because at that point you got to go perfect. I think if we do really good at free agency, just bringing in a few pieces, right? I think maybe we hit about 4 or 5 draft picks in this year's class. I think that's pretty good, right? If you can get about 4 or 5 starters, or 4 or 5 contributors, that can really help you out. I think that's really good for a first year and establishing some things. Not saying they got to come out and be superstars. Of course, you want the ninth overall pick to come out and look great. But even then, if they start their career in more of a complementary role, still making some plays, whether that be offensively or defensively, and you have a few guys in the second through fifth rounds that come in, play, not crazy percentages of your snap count, but a good decent bit. Because some of them might be in rotational positions like defensive line, and even in the secondary. I think that could be beneficial. So I think you can hit on 4 or 5 this year, and then maybe hit on another 4 or 5 next year. Now we're really talking about changing the landscape. So I think Kellen Moore's already done a fantastic job rounding out his coaching staff. You've seen, especially on the defensive side, we've seen a couple college guys join the team, and so to me, in my opinion, that shows that hey, we're gonna develop some guys. We want to really attack that college scouting and what's going on that end. And what better than to bring in the guys that are in the trenches on that note than like guys who have coached in college in the most recent years and bringing them in. They can help us from a draft prospect, big board type deal. But they can also show us some things that are happening in the college game that maybe translate to what we're trying to do defensively in the pro game or offensively in the pro game. And so I really like what he's doing with his staff so far. And now I'm interested again. What's the personnel going to look like? What are the players going to look like? And again, it's the NFL Combine, we're really hyper focused on the draft, but how we handle free agency, that's not saying going, big spending or anything, but how we handle free agency is going to give us an idea at least about, okay, what's the type of team we're trying to build. So I'm personally looking forward to that. I can't wait. But again, those are the things that I would do if I was Kellen Moore. Let's talk about the Derek Carr situation. Let's attack some key areas in free agency that include left guard, really, some interior defensive line, some secondary, some linebacker help. And you got to get me a guy, not my guy, but a guy that I'm familiar with that can provide a little bit of stability to this room because we are going to be without a veteran quarterback in Derek Carr. And um, I personally think his tenure with the Saints from a how he handled the quarterback room is night and day between what he was in Vegas. We saw that exit, not necessarily wanting to work with guys. You know, even after DA got fired, even though he was dealing with the injuries, he still showed a willingness to work with Spencer and Jake. And I think part of that is he had to showcase that to other teams, right? But I mean, whether it's for show or what, I can't tell you because I don't know Derek Carr, and I'm not him. But at least from the looks of it, it looked like he actually poured into the guys in that quarterback room. And obviously Jake speaks highly of him because of the Fresno State connection. But even Spencer speaks about what Derek has meant to them and meant to him in his development, his rookie year. So I think that's a good sign. And so we're going to be losing that, right? So whether it's Spencer taking the helm or you're drafting a quarterback, I think you need a veteran there, and what better veteran for a Kellen Moore led team than Cooper Rush, who has done well for this guy. So that's where I am. Next week, guys, remember we're going to do who are the top 3 to 5 free agents at each position that I want the Saints to really look at. And I'll do offensive line, defensive line instead of doing left tackle, right tackle, all that type of stuff. So just kind of give you an idea. And I might say pass catcher, running back. So pass catcher will include wide receivers and tight ends. I'll say running backs, offensive line, defensive line, veteran quarterbacks. I'm gonna be specific about that. Um, and then linebackers, and then secondary. So I'm not going to just do cornerbacks and safeties. I'm just say secondary, and then kind of break it down like that. So um, looking forward to that episode. It's coming a week from today. It's going to be a little bit of a late one because some work stuff going on that day, but definitely going to get it done for you guys, and looking forward to that episode as well. But as I end this one, I'll say this, as I always do. If I offended anyone, that's a good thing, right? It's an opportunity for me to learn. And it's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.